Ben, we were talking a little bit about the way that the Republicans might handle reconciliation, and you were mentioning that there's some analogies or comparisons you wanted to draw between what Republicans may do and what Democrats have done in the past on these big reconciliation bills.
I mean, yeah, I think as Steve was saying, we had Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema really checking a lot of Democrats' worst fiscal impulses, and we're just not going to see that on the Republican side. I mean, even in 2017, we had folks like Bob Corker who were saying they would put a check on TCJ and then didn't. This time, we don't even really have those sorts of folks, and so I think as from my perspective, they're and as Brian was saying, they're probably just going to plow ahead with as many tax cuts as they're able to get through. And I think one thing they should be cautious about, and I doubt they will be, but they should look at the challenges that the Democrats had, even with Manchin and Sinema putting a big break on the biggest ambitions. Democrats pushed a lot of spending through reconciliation. We saw how voters viewed that with its impacts on inflation. And that's a big reason, maybe the biggest reason, why Democrats got routed in the recent election. And I think there's a big risk for Republicans from not learning from that lesson. We see them not just trying to push TCJA through with the TCJA extension, but actually making it bigger. And if they're not offsetting that, they may find themselves doing the same things that that Biden did and paying a similar price for it. Last thing I'll say on this is, Brian was talking about the deficit in 2017 versus today. I mean, you also have to think about what the conversation about inflation was in 2017 versus today. 2017, people were, there were some pretty influential people who were saying that inflation just wasn't a thing anymore, that this wasn't something to be concerned about. And there was little concern about how the Trump tax cuts could be pushing inflation up. This time, I think it's a much more real concern, and they'll ignore it at their peril.
Yeah, Brian, do we talked a little bit about what Republicans might be concerned about deficits, but inflation is something that really gets people's attention, as we saw in the election. Is there some concern that a huge unpaid for tax cut could have an effect on inflation?
Well, absolutely. Here's my concern. To build on Ben's point, when Biden took office 4 years ago and they wanted to do this big $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan right after a $900 billion stimulus that had passed in December, economists warned Democrats this is going to unleash inflation, particularly with supply chains not able to catch up. You're already going to get some inflation, but this is going to make it worse if you do this. And it wasn't just conservative economists. It was Larry Summers, Jason Furman said, you're already facing a post-pandemic inflationary environment. Don't make it worse with stimulus. And the Democrats ignored them, and we got inflation rising to 9.1%. They couldn't bring it back down in time to win back voter support, and they lost. Well, now Trump gets elected, and his agenda is entirely inflationary. Tariffs, mass deportations, tax cuts, spending increases, and even trying to take political control of the Federal Reserve in order to have more generous monetary policy. Every one of these items is inflationary. And once again, you have economists warning a new president, don't do this, because we've seen how voters react to inflation. And once it starts growing, it's really hard to pull back. And it's kind of amazing to see Trump risking repeating the same mistake of the president he just beat. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail. Sometimes we economists actually get things right and should be listened to a little bit.